Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and pleasure of having Vivek Rao, who is the president and founder of Foundation.ai, a AI tool to help you with your practice. We're going to get into it. Thank you for being here today, Vivek.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken. It's an absolute pleasure. And it's foundationai.com. So there's no .ai. We couldn't afford the domain. They wanted like $100,000 for it.
Oh, okay. So it's foundationai.com.
Correct.
My bad.
Not at all. No problem.
I saw Vivek at the Mass Torts Made Perfect, and I was looking at a booth, and I was talking to these people, and I said, I want you on my podcast because our listeners need to know about this, because to me, it's the real deal. But tell us about yourself first, and then we'll get into foundationai.com. But I really want to get know a little bit about you, your journey to where you got to now.
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about it. I started my journey probably similar to a lot of your listeners. I went to law school. And so I graduated back in 2009. I wasn't planning on being a trial lawyer, though. I was planning on doing capital markets real estate finance. And I had a job at one of these white shoe law firms doing that at Deckert, a Philadelphia law firm, although I was in the San Francisco office. And, 2009 wasn't a great time to be a capital markets real estate finance lawyer. So that journey lasted all of like 6 months, and I was unceremoniously told to pack it up and go home. And, when the firm just kind of folded up that practice group. And so I ended up working with startups, kind of hanging my own shingle, but working with startups and with healthcare companies and just, whoever I could, doing transactional work back in Los Angeles with another partner of mine who also got severance out of a real estate practice group. And, I wasn't as good at running a law firm as probably a lot of your listeners. So I ended up getting a day job to pay the bills doing workers' compensation defense, actually. And so one of the companies that I started working with on the startup representation front was an AI company. And I'm not a tech guy by nature. I'm literally a dumb lawyer. But this company was doing healthcare provider analytics and AI. And that was the first time I saw this intelligent document processing and computer vision and thought about some of the stuff that computers could do. And this is back in 2014, 15. And so that company, Enlightiks, which actually the co-founders of this company, the technical brains behind my company, all came from that one. They were building software that could, amongst other things, look at medical images and, detect diabetic retinopathy from fundoscopic images, read medical reports and pull out information. And meanwhile, at the law firm I was at, we were about 100 attorney law firm. And we thought we were very advanced because we were on ProLaw. We were a digital system. We'd gone paperless. California workers' compensation is super paper intensive and document intensive. And so, we had gone to a digital system very early compared to a lot of firms, but we had a 20-person mailroom team that was there. Every single document, 10,000 individual documents would come in a day through the fax, the mail, email boxes, and every single one of those, someone had to look at it. They had to query our system to figure out what matter it belonged to. And at one point, I was handling 4 cases that were all Warner Mears versus Costco. The firm had 6 at the same time. So match it to the right one of those cases, put it in the right folder. Was it discovery, correspondence, medical or a medical legal? Name it to a naming convention and alert the right person. Maybe it's a paralegal if it's a medical report, handling attorney if it's a pleading. And even if that was done totally correctly, it would take forever. It would be days sometimes, defense side, very inefficient. Days, even weeks for a document to come in and you to get it as the attorney needed to handle it. You'd miss deadlines. We missed hearings. It was done wrong all the time, stuff going into wrong matters and things like that. So essentially the way this all came together is my co-founders sold off the healthcare company and were conflicted out of doing anything in healthcare. And, I was looking at this problem and I talked to people on both the plaintiff side and the defense side, and everyone had this issue. Everyone was going digital. This analog mailroom process was just really broken and difficult to deal with. And so I got the technical brains behind the prior company to take a look. And this is back in about 2000, late 18, early 19, and say, look, like this AI stuff you all are doing, can we use that to solve this problem for law firms? A lot of documents, a lot of information has to be read by people right now. Maybe we can read it by machines and solve some of these challenges. And we set out to do that a little over 5 years ago. So we've been at it for a bit now. And that's how I came to kind of take my background in working with technology companies and AI companies and high volume document intensive litigation to build Foundation AI into what it is now.
Well, I would think this would have been a lot of mass tort firms would probably love to use this. Do they have a lot of mass tort firms using it?
Actually, right now, the majority of our customer base is a lot of workers' comp, both on a lot of plaintiff workers' comp and defense, but also a lot of single event PI firms, both ones that are involved in a lot of pre-lit, ones that are involved in a lot of litigation, and ones that are involved in both. Just the volume of different documents that come, especially for like a busy pre-lit firm that are coming in on a regular basis, that's what we're really dealing with. I mean, a lot of times when people think about documents, they're thinking of discovery, they're thinking of the medical records that are coming in. But in that case, if you're getting, a retrieval business has already got a portal into your system and they're giving you all the records on a particular file, and it's already going to go to the right place, or it's not too hard to take all those records and put them in the right place. And then there's AI we can talk about that can help review those records and pull insights out of it. But one of the things that we're talking about here is all of the daily correspondence that comes in, the thousands of individual documents. And if you've got a lot of different files, there's a lot of, whether it's stuff from the insurance company, whether it's, faxed in medical reports, whether it's stuff from your third party, the expenses, your bills that are coming in, all of this stuff that just comes in, that just has to be managed and set to the right place. That's one of the big pain points that I think we solve for a lot of these firms. But from there, the idea is that once our software can match every document to the right matter, right, classify it to the right document type, put it in the right place in the practice management system, and we integrate with all the major practice management systems, Litify, Filevine, Smart Advocate, Clio, Smokeball, to put things in the right place and then trigger workflows in those systems, we can then execute, document dependent workflows. So think about that like if-thens. If a medical report, then maybe summarize it or figure out whether this MRI has a positive finding. If a pleading, pull information out of it to route into the fields in the practice management system. If an event notice, like a notice of deposition or notice of hearing, pull out the information necessary to write that straight to the firm's calendar, stuff like that. So we can take from this intake of document level, start automating a lot of the workflows that trigger from there.
So it does more than just bring in a file and put it in the right place. It actually thinks about what to do with it next, or what, I guess you train it basically, right?
Yeah. So the way we think about this is it's been trained to understand what documents are. And so we've trained it on millions of documents, across the country to be able to understand and classify documents to particular document types. And then each individual firm has their own unique way that they operate, right? So your firm might call a document one thing, another firm might call it something different. Your firm might want that document. Let's use a medical report as an example. Your firm, you might have, case managers, paralegals, attorneys, you might have a large built out operation. And you might say, when a medical report comes in, we want that to get routed to the case manager. We want them to review it for this kind of information and update a field in Litify this way. And another firm might just have a solo with an attorney and he wants to see everything. And the software can be configurable to all those use cases. So based on document type, it's more, I'd say, mapping to the workflow than training. It's configurable such that we could say, if this document type, then do this, that, execute these workflows based on rules that the firm themselves can figure out. So we say that our firms get to define their best practices. Like, this is how we want to name documents using this convention. This is how we want things routed. This is where we want things placed. And then those best practices, those workflows just get automatically executed, once a system identifies what something is, and that is either, is confirmed, and so on, if that makes sense.
And the deal that I like about your company is that you've been doing this a while. Here's the thing, we talked about it before we started this broadcast, is that, man, there's something new coming out for law firms every other day. And, it all looks, how can you trust it? How do you know if it's really works? And there's some that's been out there for a while. I mean, it's been out there like you have 4 or 5 years. But what is a lawyer to do if you've got like 3 different AI companies that say they can do this one thing? like I've talked with two companies that do the same thing, and one said, "Well, we've been doing it 5 years." I said, "Well, yeah, but they're not hooked into the system like we are. Not HIPAA compliant." Da 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 da. I mean, how do you know?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? I think especially, for plaintiff attorneys, because, I was just reading an article, by the way, yesterday. It came out a couple weeks ago. On the other side, it's the Claims Litigation Management Association. It's like the only organization for the defense bar and for the insurance companies that's just talking about how the plaintiff bar is just winning the battle with AI, because plaintiff attorneys, are very much like startup founders. They obviously can accept a fair amount of risk. They've got guts. They believe in themselves, right? And they're interested and willing to try new things to get a better outcome for what they want to do. And as a result, there's all kinds of companies that see this opportunity and are now coming out with software and trying to pitch it to plaintiff attorneys. And a lot of it, as you just mentioned, looks largely the same. And I think one of the reasons is now with these new models that have come out, and everyone has heard enough about, these foundational models, as we call them, like GPT and, Google's version, which is now called Gemini, and all of these models. And so what these models are really good at is replicating the idea that they're reasoning, right? Presenting language in a way that sounds compelling, right? And makes you think that these things are actually thinking. And what they can do just out the box is really impressive. It's really impressive until you dive kind of 2 layers down below, right? And so the natural thing that everyone's heard of is this idea of hallucinations, these things that convincingly spout out something that is just kind of not true. And that's like the far extent of where things can go awry. But the other part, right, is that these systems can say things that are correct, but then the question is what are they missing that's not correct? And I think that if I'm on the other side and I'm evaluating software, I think it's really important to understand that anyone who tells you that the AI is going to do everything and it's going to, you're going to give it an input and it's going to spit out an output is full of it. There's just no way. The AI is not there yet. I think the way that we have to look at software is how well it works with the lawyer or with the paralegal or with the user, right? To combine the two to deliver a solid output. We call that human in the loop. And so the way in which the system is able to complement the attorney's skill to create a usable output is critically important. And one of the things that matters there is the idea of reliability, confidence scores, and things like that. Like in our example with our software, which there isn't a lot of things that are doing, what we do. It's kind of the longer haul to build it and a little more boring than some of the really sexy, really sexy stuff that's really easy to build on the foundational models now. Everything we do, what makes it trustworthy is that it has a confidence score associated. So our software, for example, we wouldn't say that every document that comes in just automatically goes exactly where you want. Every prediction, every decision our software makes has a confidence score associated with it. And each individual firm gets to choose, their desired confidence threshold they want to tolerate. And the system then will present anything below that to a user for validation. And so with our software, the idea is and I think a lot of the softwares that are actually driving a ton of value, it's this idea of an Iron Man, not a Terminator, where it's decision support software and they're smart enough to know when to call somebody in to look at and when not to. Because if you have to, they say like, oh, if you use GPT, just review everything, just make sure you check everything. But if you have to review every single thing and you don't know what could be wrong or what is or isn't, I mean, a lot of people find themselves in the same position. We're like, well, it's faster for me to just do it myself than to have to go through and guess what if this may or may not be correct.
Yeah, I think it's a little perplexing right now. I mean, you keep talking about foundations. So what do you mean by that? Because I don't even know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so I think the term foundational models is how people are refusing to these very large LLMs that have come out and become very commonplace people talk about them a lot since. GPT is a great example of one. And what these are is they're very general models that have been trained on a lot of general information. And so because of that, they're really good at answering like basic questions and doing things like, I can use GPT to write a bedtime story for my daughter very well. Some of the problems with them is they're not trained on specific information, like the kind of information we need in the legal field, right? But the other problems with them is that they're overconfident in what they do. So they won't a lot of them, especially like if you're using GPT, if you've ever tried using GPT to help you drafting something, a legal brief, they don't necessarily tell you when they're not right or when they're not confident. Their job is to predict and mimic, what the next string of thought or what the response is that you hope to get out of the thing. And so they're over, I guess as people think, they overfit to try to please the user with what they provide. And so as a result of that, they can make mistakes that can really trip you up if you're using them for a lot of work, these foundational models. GPT is a great example of one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they call it now, but back even before anybody was even talking about this stuff, IBM had this thing that was like a brain that companies were using. I guess we would call it a foundational model. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Watson.
IBM had Watson. Yeah, Watson. Was that kind of like a foundational model, or not? That's something different.
So Watson was a ML model, and they trained it on a system. They trained on a number of different models, and even this concept of LLMs, it's a type of model, like a large language model. It's been trained on a lot of information. So we use, even for other things, and GPT isn't the first LLM. Like, we use, for example, in our software, we use GPT for certain things, but we use, one called BERT and Roberta. BERT was developed by Google back in like 2018, and it was trained on, a bunch of information. And it's good for certain things that GPT is not as good for. It's easier to fine tune for specific tasks, where GPT can be more challenging to adapt to things. It requires less computational resources. So there have been these foundational models in a sense for a while. Essentially, all foundational model is it's been trained on a broad spectrum of generalized and unlabeled information, and they can kind of perform a wide variety of general tasks like natural language understanding and generating and things. GPT is really good for generating text, and that's where it really shines as compared to summarizing documents and generating text, as compared to some other models that are good for classification, data extraction, question answering, and things like that.
Yeah, but like talking about AI, I mean, Facebook's been using AI or some form of it for 10, 12 years, right? Or probably longer.
I mean, if you think about AI,
algorithms,
Exactly. I mean, AI has been around and been under the surface for everything from a spam filter in its own sense in your email is some form of AI. It's classifying documents that it's bundling them together that it thinks look like spam. And it's, and we've trusted that forever, right? So AI has been around. I think that it's really, really come to a head with really GPT is what brought it to everyone's forefront. And it's this, I think the difference really is it's being used now for much more when they say generative AI, to generate content. And that's a place where people haven't really trusted AI very long. You remember how chatbots were even, a few months ago. They can only answer very specific questions and things like that. And now with what people have seen from generative AI and the ability to generate text and prompts, it's opened up this whole new world of being able to create, content. And so the main thing, and I think tying back to your question, is just to use it and make sure that the software you're using has appropriate guardrails, has been, built. And whether it's, people throw the term fine-tuned around, but really a lot of what they're really doing is just prompt engineering on these things and using sort of methodologies to get better outputs from these GPT models, but to make sure that it's been built in a way with the right guardrails that'll enable you to use it effectively when it comes to using it to generate content, and then having an appropriate amount of an appropriate way to bring a human in the loop to ensure the veracity of what the final output is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of law firm owners are just sitting back. They're watching it, but they're not ready to delve into it because they want to let somebody else be the guinea pigs. You know what I'm saying? But what you're telling me is something like yours. You've gone through your beta. You've tested it for 5 years. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the other big differences is what we do is we're not really automating legal work, right? We're automating clerical, administrative, back office, kind of mundane, tedious work that has to get done, but generally it's a cost of doing business and an overhead expense. And it's a lot of work that people have been outsourcing lately to save costs on, with mixed results, or that people have, unfortunately, a lot of our firms have very high skilled people doing this grunt work because they can't trust anyone else to do it. So what we've seen with a lot of the firms we deal with now is they used to be able to find file clerks who could do this and they could trust to do this document intake work kind of effectively. But then with the new sort of Gen Z workforce, they find that it's difficult to hire people at the price points they're willing to pay who have the necessary responsibility, attention to detail, care enough to do this job right. And when it's done ineffectively, you don't really realize it's a problem till way down the road, till a document gets missed, till something happens. And so a lot of the firms we deal with have, legal assistants or skilled paralegals doing this work that is pretty menial and beneath them. And they could be spending that time doing a lot of higher value work. So a lot of the firms, I think we've got two kinds of firms we look at. One is a very large one that has a team, maybe an offshore team or teams of people doing this work, and they're looking to reduce costs and speed up the process and make it more consistent and efficient. And then we've got firms where, the process is being done by well-paid, very capable people who obviously don't want to be doing this mindless work and could be using that time to do much higher value things if freed up to do it. So I think we see a lot of both of that in the customer base we've got. And because it's not the legal work, I think it's the work we're doing is a lot less sort of complex and less trustworthy. We're not trying to automate the creation of documents or the practicing of law. And the way I've always thought about it is, if you trust that AI can drive cars now, right, and can read complex medical images, it's not a big stretch that it can do what you're willing to offshore to a low wage worker or, what entry level people do.
So I know there are people getting back to the foundation AI, your company. I know people always ask me, well, what does it cost? I mean, how is you structure it? I guess it depends on how big the firm is or how many documents or something.
Yeah, that's right. It really comes down to document volumes. We have tiered pricing that's in line with, that's acceptable, I think, and tenable for small firms, mid-sized firms, and large firms. And we've got customers across all of them. And the point of our pricing is it's based on volume because our costs are really based on volume. And these models are not cheap to run on all these documents. Every single document that goes to the software gets OCR'd and then has AI models running on it using natural language processing and all of that. So the output of these are all OCR documents. This whole process is, pretty compute intensive, and compute costs, as everyone knows, are probably one of the big driving factors of the cost of AI right now. But we always would guarantee, and we'd always, I think, our customers are a testament to that customers should see an ROI from our software based on labor cost savings. So just a hard dollar ROI, as well as all of the other benefits of having more organized information, faster and all that, but just a hard dollar ROI, within the first month or two. So there's an implementation, obviously, for our software because we're customizing every piece of the deployment to each individual firm, from the way in which documents are named, to the way in which they're routed, to the workflows that trigger from each document. And then after the implementation, it's monthly based on volumes.
Righty. So if anybody wants to find out more, where do they need to go? Who do they need to contact?
Yeah, I think the best way is just you can go to our website, foundationai.com, and there's links there to get in contact with the team. People can email me directly if they'd like at Vivek at foundationai.com, and I'll either answer myself or get it to the right person. Yeah, I think those are probably the best ways. And then we're obviously going to be at PILMA at your event coming up. So happy to talk to anyone there. And then we're doing a lot of the events that I think a lot of your customer base would be coming to. So we'll be around to talk to anyone, and people can find us at a lot of the events coming up.
Yeah, as we record this, it's 4 weeks away. And just so everybody knows, we're like 35% ahead of where we were last year at this time for our sign up. So it's going to be the bigger one, I think. I really do.
Yeah. We're looking forward to it.
We're excited. Well, good deal, my friend. Anything I didn't ask you that I should ask you?
No, I think that you did a real good job. I think that, if anyone has any questions, you nailed it right at the beginning, right? That it's a confusing place right now with all of the new technology that's out there. And quite frankly, I'm not the expert in the AI and how the sausage is made. I think that what your clients need to do, and what I try to do as a lawyer who's the CEO of this company, is understand what's the business problem I need solved and how can AI solve it. When I look at our company and I look at what we do, we're not selling AI. We're selling a solution to a business problem, and AI just happens to be a tool that we use that can help solve this problem. And I think that's the big difference between when looking at companies that are driving a ton of value out there versus like companies like Esquire Tech that are automating discovery responses, even upstream with demand letters. They're solving a business problem, and the AI is just a mechanism to help them do that, as opposed to a lot of the stuff that's out there now that's coming out every day. I see something new, as you brought up, that's really just selling the AI. But the question is, like, what is the value of this, and how well have they done to solve my problem with that AI, as opposed to just telling me something that's cool, but isn't designed to thought through by lawyers, built by people who have been in the field to solve the problem that we face as lawyers. I think that's a big difference. So I think you've nailed it with your questions.
Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you at the summit. Look, I mean, sounds like I like this. I actually talked about it to my masterminds last time I was talking to them. So this is something you need to look at. So
we appreciate it. And, we're
no, but I mean, I think it is. It's not might not be for everybody, but I think everybody needs to check out these things and figure out, like you said, does this make sense for my firm? Is this a problem we're having, or do we feel like the way we're doing it, we're okay? Or we're outsourcing it, so we're okay right now. As we know, as you grow, you think your margins will get bigger, but they don't. They actually get smaller unless you're on top of it. You got to keep your costs just seem to explode like a mushroom. I don't know how to explain it, but and lawyers, as they grow, start scaling up, they see that, and they say, this can't be right. I'm supposed to be making more money, and then they're making an extra $2 million, but they're only making an extra 10,000 out of $2 extra million because they not scaled it properly. You know what I'm saying? You got to be efficient.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. And looking at the initial efficiency and the labor costs is important, but there's more to it. I think one of the reasons back from that article that the plaintiff bar is really beating the defense bars. They've got better data, better access to their data, and they're using it better, and they share it, right? The plaintiff bar is much more, collegiate and works together than the defense bar, which is crazy how much different it is on each side of things, right? And so having good data requires you to have very organized documents, stuff like that. So one of the big things, obviously, is just saving time and money, getting things in the right place. But the other thing is just consistency, knowing that you can look at any file, know exactly what you're looking at, pulling that data out. A lot of firms are buying these practice management softwares or buying softwares where they can leverage data, but they're not actually entering the data in those systems. So one of the things is being able to pull specific information out of documents, like, the billed amount, paid amount, and adjustments from a medical bill, and actually get that entered into your practice management system so that you can use all these fabulous tools that are coming out, actually use them. A lot of people are buying great software from Smart Advocate or Litify or Filevine, and they're not able to utilize all of the benefits because it's labor intensive to actually put the data in place and things like that. So those are other ways, ancillary benefits or additional benefits that software like ours can drive to help really maximize the efficacy of other software that people are buying. We like to think of ourselves as a bridge to automate a lot of the human labor involved to properly use and accelerate the use of these other digital platforms that forward-thinking firms are buying and implementing right now.
Well, listen, thank you so much. And like I said, I look forward to seeing you in about a month. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ken. It's been great.
No, man, thank you. I look forward to seeing you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.